Before I start, I want to give a shtickle like Hakdame. This year is dedicated to Zeicha Nishmas Reb Chaim Gurevich. The truth is, I have to say, I never met him. I never spoke to him. I mean, besides on the shir. But from the beginning, when we started with these shiurim and the Farbrengens on Zoom, he was from the first to go on. He stayed on the whole time. You could see the whole time how he was listening. You could see just from the way he was listening and the way he went on, always, or the first, or from the first of the people to go on, mamish the edelkeit and the wanting to understand the siche, mamish made such an impression on me. Last Wednesday, he was one of the first people on, and then all of a sudden you hear this happens, this mamish tragedy, and it in my heart it brought us. He made a certain connection, even though I never met him in person. I never knew him. But it makes such a connection, seeing how person, the interest in the sikha and wanting to learn and wanting, and so mamish from the beginning on. I don't think he missed ever a week or if I bring in anything that he had. So, tein shmos tzrur betzrei rachayim. Soll sein a guter Better. Sag mit Starov sein mit alle andere Jiden Chassidim, gehen zum Reben und Peil sein, schon quasi die Gule Schleime. Wir sollen von Kisa Kovet Peil sein. Anyway, the Karav Mamish, the Kitzav Ran and Sheikh Nofer, Behu B'Seichom. Okay, we'll start. This is in Chelik Yud Zayin, the second Sicha of Parshas Vayikra. The Seder from the Karbonos was a Redinim Stein in Unter Parsha is the Seder, the order of the sacrifices of the Karbonos, which are written in this week's Parsha, Parsha Vayikra, because this is the Parsha where the Torah starts all the dinim of the Karbonos. So the Seder is like this. Frier Korban Eilo, Minchon Shlomim. First it talks about a Korban Eilo. A Eilo is a Korban that the whole Korban, the whole animal would be burnt on the Mizbeach. Usually the Karbonos, only certain parts of the animal went on the Mizbeach, and the meat was eaten, whether it was by the Kayanim or by the Bailim. But Korban Eilo was completely burnt on the Mizbeach. It's Korban Eilo. Then it talks about the Korban Mincha, different Korbanos of Mincha of flour, and the different types of Korbanos of flour, and Shlomim. Then it talks about the Korban Shlomim, which is a Korban which is not an Eilo. They would burn part of it, the fats would go on the Mizbeach, the blood which beshits on the Mizbeach, every other part was eaten, but the different Shlomim. But the common denominator of all these Korbanos that the Torah starts with was Einen Korbanos Nedova. They're all talking about the Korbanos which a person donates, because there are two types of Korbanos. There are many types of Korbanos, but generally some Korbanos are called Korbanos Cheva. When you're obligated, if a person doesn't evade it in a certain way or under certain circumstances, has to bring a korban chata. Certain things that you have to do, you have to bring a korban asham. All kinds of korbanos chayva. Then there are korbanos nedava. These are donations. A person wants to, out of his good will, out of his nidivas halev, we call it, his heart wants him, so he brings the korban. So these korbanos that the Torah starts with in this week's parsha, which is Eila Mincha Shlema, are all korbanos nedava. The Rashi ties gleich with Chilas HaParsha, as Rashi says right in the beginning of the parsha. The beginning of the parsha where it says, Odom ki yakiv mekem, if a person will be makim from amongst you, and the Torah goes on to tell us the dinim of the karbonis. Rasha says that the word ki yakiv means kishe yakiv, when he will be makiv, if he will be makiv. And when we say if he will be makiv, means the karbonis nedova diber inyan. Rasha says that this inyan in this parsha is talking about karbonis nedova, because a korban chayva you can't say if he'll be makiv, if he'll be makiv, you have to be makiv. So it's talking about Karbonos Nedova. And then the Torah talks about Chatos and Osham, and Karbonos Cheva. These are Karbonos that you are obligated to bring. Is not movement, not understood. Emestak as Rasha a hechrach from Posik as the Karbonos Nedova Dibur Inyan. Even though Rasha has proof from the Posik in Pshuta Shel Mikra that it's talking about the Karbonos Nedova, and as we see in our order 3, the Rebbe says, before Shem talk about it, that in Kutusichas Chelik Yud Beis, which we learned last year, the Rebbe explained what makes Rasha say that it's talking about Karbonos Nedova. But Rasha has proof that that's what it's all about. But the Shailish tells sich from Posik Gufa, but the question is on the Posik itself. Farvos heipt on the Torah with Karbonos Nedova. Why does the Torah start the halachas of Karbonos with Karbonos that you don't have to bring, that if you decide to bring it? First and foremost, it's important to know the dinim of the Karbonos that you must bring. Was I eat muss bringen? Something that you have to bring. Then, from Karbonos is eine blaze nedova to bring the laws of the Karbonos, which are only a donation that you don't have to bring. Since it's Akash in the simple meaning of the psukim, but as Rashi Gedar Bavor, and Rashi should have said it, as we know that the Rashi Every Rasha Sikha, many Rasha Sikha, we know that the sheet of the Rebbe is that Rasha took upon himself to answer every kasha that's there in Pshuta Shel Mikra. Rasha answers. So Rasha should have answered this kasha. It's a very simple kasha. Muz mezogen as in Pshuta Shel Mikra, that's machatchilik in kasha. It must be that in simple pshat, it's no kasha. Or it'll be answered if you remember what Rasha said before. In other words, if Rasha doesn't answer a certain simple kasha, must because Rasha feels that everybody could figure it out. It's very simple to answer. He doesn't have to say it. Or if you remember what you learned before, you will understand it yourself. But here, what is the answer to the shaila? Why doesn't Rasha answer? It seems like a kasha. It doesn't seem that we know what the answer is. The Chura can answer b'deichak al kaponim. Chura could answer b'deichak, which is not so simple, but you could try to answer al pi pirish Rasha, even posig v'nirtzeh lechaparolo, based on Rasha. Okay, if you say Beit will answer based on the Gemara, that doesn't help because Rasha is written to a person who never learned Gemara. Pshat. But if something else that Rasha writes, Rasha relies on it. So Rasha, within this inyan, Rasha writes in the Pasuk, by the Korban Meila, it says, "V'nirtzo loy lechaper olav," Hashem will be willing, accepting it, to forgive him. So Rasha says, "V'nirtzo loy," he will be accepted by Hashem, be willing by Hashem. Amehu maratze. And what does he make you willing? In other words, what does a Korban Meila forgive you for? We know a Korban Chatos forgives you, and as the Rebbe will mention soon, if you didn't Aveda b'shegig, but a very bad Aveda, which is Koris, if you would have done it b'mezik. So for that, you have to bring a Korban Chatos. Oshem, for other things, what is an Eila Mechaper? Now, normally we're talking about Eilas Nadova, so you don't have to bring it. So what is it Mechaper? So Rashi says, yes, Al Esev Alav Shnitik Lesev. It's a Mechaper if a person was Eiver on a positive mitzvah. See, the other ones are here for Eiver on a negative mitzvah. You did something wrong. Here, not you did something wrong, but you missed out doing something that you had to do. Or Alav Anitik Lesev, which means a lav, a negative commandment, but there's an essa, the Torah gives a positive commandment to fix the lav. I'll just give an example, not exactly this is the right example, but just to make it easier. The Torah says, lay sigzo. It's a lav, don't steal. But then the Torah says, if you did steal, return it. So there's an essa that says I could fix the lav. So for that, the Korban Neila forgives. Das heißt, it means, as Korban Neila is taka Korban Nedova, was means nicht mechuyev to bring it. It's taka Nedova which you're not obligated, you don't must bring it. But the Korban is maratza nemt arop achayva. But nevertheless, when you do bring it, it forgives you on something that's a chayva that you have to be forgiven for. Achiyuv einish for mention. It takes away a punishment the person would have gotten. Kidbesn down here would not punish for an essay, but the Eibusher will punish. So if you decide to bring a korban, you don't have to, but if you bring a korban neila, it will forgive you for that. Korban neila is also connected about something that is a must. Balpia says, moving there, say this. And now we can explain the order of things. Frier korban neila, first talks about eila, später chatos, then chatos, and then noch oshem, and then oshem. What's the seder? Says mer olu laza idol chashvasol eivers ein b'meila darfen bringen a korban neila. It's more possible that a yid should be aver on something that deserves a korban neila, because a korban neila is a lighter avera. We said it only is there for to forgive you if you didn't do an essay, which is not as strict as transgressing a leis essay. So the first thing you talk about something that's more shayach. What's more shayach for a yid to do? To be aver a big avera or to not to do something small? That's the most possible thing. So first it talks about the korban Eilo, which is forgives you for a light avera. But says meratzef an avera kalot forgives you on a light avera, which is, as we said before, an essa or a lav anitikal essa, a lav which is Torah forgives you. That's not, you're not chayv malchus for it. It's not the same. So that is more chance that he should do it via korban chatos than to have to bring a korban chatos. Was kumt und is mechaper of averas chamuras. That is brought to forgive on strict averas. Dover shazdein lav akora. The din, when do you bring a chatos if you did an avera b'shegig? But which kind of avera? An avera that's a lav, but not just a plain lav. An avera that's a lav and kodesh. So therefore, first comes the elo, and then comes chatos. Wieder kumt var oshem. Chatos also comes before oshem. But chatos nemt arum aggressor at sol averes. The oshem was bringt nor of yonim misyomim. Chatos is brought for more and more amount of averes than the Oshem, which is only a very few Avedas. So when it comes to Chatas, Chatas comes before Oshem. So first comes Eilan, then comes Chatas before Oshem. By the way, the Rebbe in Order 6 says that maybe the reason is because that's more shaykh to bring a Korban Eilah, because more shaykh a person should be over that. So Derech Rasha says in Pasha Mishpotim, in different places, when the Pasuk mentions certain things, Rasha says it doesn't apply only in that case. Like certain places it says if an ox, something, Rasha says it's not only an ox, any animal. Why does the Torah mention ox? Diber HaKosav behavior. The Torah mentions things which is more common. Same thing here. An Eilah is more possible that a person should have to bring because it's more chance that Chas v'Shalom should be able. So l'chura, that could be the answer where the Torah starts with Eilah, which is even though it's a korban nedava, but it has a shaykhus to chayva, and it's a very common korban that the Yid should bring to forgive for a chayva. Das ist aber nicht ausgehalten, but it's not true. From Eid the Torah is magdem Eid, nicht was is a korban nedava. Nor zu dem was is verbunden mit chayva, ratze al esse. If we're saying, as we said now, that the reason that Torah starts with Eilah is not because korban nedava, because really we said korban nedava is not a reason to start. You should not start with nedava. The reason it starts with Eilah because Eilah is possible to forgive on a chayva, so it has to do with chayva because it forgives on a esse and lavanitik lesse. Hat doch nicht genug zum Afsig sein zwischen Eilah und Chatas mit andere Karbonis and Dove. So that would be only good if it brings Eilah and right after that Chatas. Eilah is more chance. So basically what we would be saying is he wants to tell us chayva. But in chayva itself, the Torah feels that Eilah is more chance to bring. It's also a shtickle chayva and then Chatas. But why in the middle between Eilah and Chatas, he brings other karbonis nedove mincha and shlomim? So that proves Muzma Zogen has to say der posik will take magdim sein karbonis nedove far karbonis chayva. It's not because Eilah is also a chayva, and within chayva it's more common. The Torah wants to start with dafke with karbonis nedove. Korban Eilah steht for korban Chatas, and why is Eilah before Chatas? Not because it's more common to bring. Mitzadem was Eilah is a korban nedove. It's because Eilah is a nedove. How do we know that's the reason? Because he brings other korbanos nedove before Chatas. The style of the style of the Torah is to start off with korban Eilah. But the question is, why? Wouldn't it make more sense to start with korban chayva instead of korban nedove? Let me just verstehen, behagdim noch at mir. The Rabbi said, understand this, I'll ask another question. The Torah starts here, even when it comes to the korbanos chayva. After it starts the Eilah, then it talks about korban. After it starts korban nedove, I mean the Eilah. Then it talks about korban chayva. So what korbanos does it talk about? Korbanos chayva obligated. Korbanos that a yochid, an individual, is obligated. Like a chatos, an individual did an aveda, b'shegeg, whatever he has to bring a chatos and an osham. These are all korbanos yochid. Korbanos that the individual has to bring. It's a chayva, but korbanos that the individual brings. Why doesn't he start with korbanos sibur? Why doesn't he start with the communal korbanos? L'chura ipchem is started. This one should be the opposite. Früher darf man sagen, was ist negate im ganzen Zibur. First, you have to tell what's important for the whole community, and then you'll say benegay yichid what you do yichid. So the another question. Chura button you can't answer. And Chura could answer why he doesn't start with korbanos sibur. It says like this: korbanos sibur are nebiki shayach to zmanim yichodim in yor. Korbanos sibur are mainly certain special times of the year, Shabbos, Yom Tov, v'chulu. Again, korbanos yochid. But the korban of an individual, whether it's a nedava or a chayva, can it sein b'cholos? Could be any time. A korban nedava, you could be any time. A chayva also. A person could do an avera chas v'sholom any time, which he has to bring a chatas. The far heip sichon parshas karbonis mit karbonis yochid. So it starts with karbonis yochid, and why? Because that's something that could be any time. So he starts that before the karbonis sibur of the special times. There is karbonis sibur that you bring every day. Every day, korban tamid. See, the korban sibur he mentioned Shabbos Yontiv is korban musaf, but korban, there is a korban sibur every day. So the Rebbe says, the dinim from korban tamid. What about the korban tamid? Was me bring pamayim b'chol yim that he bring twice a day? Shtei tak yefrier and pasha the tzaveh. That's already written. That's tak said already. He's only telling us what he didn't say yet. So korban sibur that he didn't say yet are such korbanos that have certain times when you bring it. While korbanos yochid, you could bring any time. So he starts with that. And by the way, the Rebbe in Orah 10 says another nakuda, maybe you could answer why he starts with Yochid, not with Tzibur. So he says, because b'deicheg you could say, number one, Yochid tzarech lahazer yesim and not Tzibur. When it comes to a Yochid, you have to warn him and make sure he does things right more than you have to have a Tzibur. An individual might be lazy, might not do it. So you have to be master, you have to warn him. Tzibur, it doesn't happen. That's one thing. While he says, the Gemara says in Be'eh that something that's given over to Bezdin, Bakel Masura. That's something that's, no, it's a certain thing that Eidos is given to Bezdin, and the din of an egg there is given to everybody. So we see that individuals, everybody might make mistakes. A tzibur doesn't make mistakes. So it's not so important to tell the tzibur what to do. First, I tell the yochid to make sure that they do the right thing. And the second thing, a tzibur is a combination of many yechidim, no? How do you make a tzibur? A lot of individuals together make a tzibur. So it starts off, the tzibur starts off with yochid. That's the reason. So the Rebbe has two possible answers here. Why it starts with yochid, not with tzibur. One is because korban yochid could be any time, while tzibur is in certain times. And the other reason he says here, because you have to warn maybe more the yochid than the tzibur, or the yochid is beginning and the tzibur continues. Thus is our place at time of some magdams and kabbanas yochid for kabbanas tzibur. The Rebbe says, but this cannot be the answer. This is a good reason, maybe, why kabbanas yochid come before kabbanas tzibur. As is our tamu of a time of boy, but we have to understand. For was the dinim from Karbonas Sibur and Bechlal need the monte Parsha Vayikra? Why the Karbonas Sibur Bechlal not mention the Vayikra or the Parsha Tzav? See, Vayikra and Tzav are one hemshech. That's what the Torah tells us all about the Karbonas. The Torah doesn't tell us this Karbonas Sibur at all. Nor Esht in Parsha Achre, Emer, und der Iker in Parsha Pinchos, mainly in Pinchos. All the way later, the Torah tells us about Sibur. That's the kasha. So first he said the kasha, why Yochid before Tzibur? We could answer why Yochid before, but the question is why Tzibur Bechlal not? Doesn't mention tzibur here. Why not? So basically, we have two shilas. One shaila, why does he start with korban nedava rather than korban cheva? And another shaila is why he starts with korban yochid, not the korban tzibur. They're beer because the answer is like this. In Parshas Aksuvim come to if you learn a simple pshat in the psukim, it comes out as the Parshas Akabonas from unser Parsha, and the rest chelik from Parsha Tzav, that all the dinim of korbanos written in this week's Parsha, and also in the beginning of Parsha Tzav, next week's Parsha, which is all one hemshech. Sein eine gesagt geworden, Eider, was erzählt nach dem Korah Mesheladen Kaploch Egel. See, later on, in Parsha Shmini, it says that Moshe Rabbeinu, the Eibusha told Moshe Rabbeinu took the Kohanim and anointed them and prepared them to do the Aveda, which is the Seder Achinuch von Aaron Rabbeinu b'Shmini Miluyim. What Aaron and his children should do on the 8th day of Miluyim, which means, as we all know, that after they finished making the Mishkan, they put it all together. The Eibishter said there should be 7 days of Miluyim, 7 days of preparation. So they put up the Mishkan every day, and they brought special karbonis for Miluyim. Then on the 8th day was Shmini Miluyim. That's when the regular Aveda started. Till then was only temporary. Every day was separate. And the 8th day it was Shmini Miluyim. Now it seems like that what it says in this week's Parsha Vayikra, the beginning of Tzav, was said before what it says in Parsha Shmini, that the Eibusha said, take Aaron, they called Moshe called Aaron, and he said, take an egel and a calf and do this and this and this. So what it says in this week's Parsha was said before Shmini L'Miluyim. That's what you have to remember. It said before the Mishkan was put up on a Chedesh Nisan, which was the 8th day of Miluyim. Okay. Is verstandige Parsha. Since that's true, so we understand simply. Now we understand, since when the Eibusha told it to him, to Moshe, he told it to him before, to tell the Eden, before the Shmini L'Miluyim, that's why he had to start with Karbonis of Elo and so forth. Weil Aaron und Bonne haben gedacht, wissen die Dinim von die Karbonis, they kennen sich makar sein bei Shmini L'Miluyim. As the Rebbe will explain soon, it's very possible that on the day of Shmini L'Miluyim, which the Mishkan was put up permanently, so there's special Avedis you have to do, but it's very possible that Yidden already brought Karbonis donations. As soon as the Mishkan was up, wouldn't you imagine the Yidden would want to bring Karbonis? So since Yidden are able to bring Karbonis, the Melech Aaron, who's going to become the Kohen, then has to know how to do it. And that could happen right away on the Shmini L'Miluyim. So before the Shmini L'Miluyim, he had to tell them, what should you do with the Karbonis that people bring? Just like the things that the Eibusha told Moshe to tell Aaron and his children to do, as they gedacht wissen, wie zu makrev sein die Karbonis b'Shmini L'Miluyim. There were special Karbonis on that 8th day. Didn't they have to know what to do? If they had to know what to do with the Karbonis on that day, didn't they have to be told? So for sure they were told. So for sure the Eibusha told Moshe, Moshe told Aaron, before the Shmini L'Miluyim, what they have to do. So just like what Aaron and his children had to do for themselves, they had to know before. So they also had to know Benegei all the other Yidden. As im gedarft wissen, was war a Korban sie kennen oder darfen bringen, gleich am Makom Samishkin Shmini L'Miluyim. Didn't they have to know what Karbonis you could bring right away? How to bring it, and when you could bring it, how you could bring it, Shmini L'Miluyim. So that's because Shmini L'Meluim is the first day of the permanent Mishkan, and the Karbonis, the Seder of Karbonis started, and people could bring Karbonis. And what happens if a person wants to bring? Can he bring? Can he not? They have to know already before. Especially if we're going to say, Azeich Pashas Vayikra Pashat Tzav, seinen gesagt geworden, B'tchila Shivas Me'ameluim. The Rebbe says it's not clear, but it's possible that this Pashat Tzav is not only said before the 8th day. It could be it was said, but it seems, before the 7 days prior to the 8th day, which means, kennen doch die Dienen von Parashat Vayikra und Tzav seine Gehe nicht nur bei ihm Shmini L'Meluim, nur l'chol Shmini Me'ameluim. Maybe even in those 7 days, and there is in the bottom, you have to know for sure, was there such a thing as bringing Karbonis Nadava during the 7 days of Miluim? The 8th day, for sure, they could have brought. After the official ceremonies were finished, you could bring it to regular day, you could bring Karbonis. But the Rebbe says it's possible that you could even bring it, a pipshat certainly, maybe in the 7 days when the Mishkan was up, temporarily, but maybe they could bring. And if we're going to learn, and it's possible, it's not clear, that the parshas of Vayikra and Tzav was said not only before the 8th day of Miluim, before the 7 days of Miluim, it's to tell Aaron and Bonov, or what to do, Moshe, on the days of the 7 days also you have to know, because maybe it's possible even to bring Karbonis. On the river, and since these dinim of Vayikra and Tzav are negeya right away, what people might do right away, the river hat man don nit gedarft aussagen Karbonis Sibur for Yontev, so here there's no purpose in telling in the Karbonis of Sibur of Yontev, Vashteini, Pasha Achrei, Emer, Pinchas, written and other Pashas. From those ein gesagt geworden, nor die Karbonis zu seinen oder kennen seine Gehe gleich Pashas Meise. He was only telling him about the Karbonis that might be important right now. Whether Eden actually brought Karbonis, we don't know. But they have to be told in case Eden will want to bring. Maybe they will. They have to know what to do. Now, viele die Karbonis Sibur, was mit Makar gewinnen in die Mea Maluyim. Was eine nicht von Eisen, schon nicht Stava Baby Yem. Now, there are Karbonis Sibur that they brought in the days of the Miluyim. See, there are certain Karbonis which were special made for the Miluyim. But during those times, they also brought Karbonis Sibur, which is not part of the special Karbonis, which is in the regular order. What is Lamosh? We Korban Musaf, the Shabbos, or the Shchedesh. Among those days was a Shabbos and a Shchedesh. And a Shchedesh, you have to bring special Karbonis Sibur. Oh, so these Karbonis of Shabbos and a Shchedesh were also important now. So what does the Rebbe say here? That here was only important the Karbonis Yochid, because that's the only Karbonis that's Hanegeya right away. The other ones are Hanegeya going to be later. And Karbonis Sibur are not Negeya now, but there are Karbonis Negeya now. The Rebbe says, the Baldober, as their makri from the Karbonis Sibur b'mei Ameluim is given Meisha. Who was the one that did the Karbonis in these Medei Ameluim? See, always it was the Kayanim. These days was Moshe Rabbeinu himself. The Rasha Chafriya gesagt, Rasha said that. Is nitoke hechach on zu sagen, do alle Eden. So there's no need to tell all the Eden. And this parasha is telling us, Moshe told all the Eden. The beginning of the parasha says, Daber el bnei Yisrael, speak to the Eden. So here there is no reason to tell them if the Karbonis. And the Karbonis of the Tzibur that you have to bring those days. Why? For a Moshe, was for a Korban, bring it. Because the only one that needed to know is Moshe. And Moshe knew it. Like he knew all the dinim and the rest of the Karbonis that he was told to specially bring those days. Keladim Shabbos Deacon talk, also what they brought on Shabbos and the Chatos, everything. So Moshe Rabbeinu knew. So to tell all the Eden about all the Karbonis Sibur that they had these days is not important because it's not negated to them. It'll be negated later. When Yom Tov will come, the next Shabbos will come, they'll have to know the dinim. True, but not this moment. The only things they have to know this moment is the negeh, the Karbonis, that their special Karbonis, that was said not for all the Eden, that was the special for Miluim, but the Karbonis, the general din of Karbonis, they only had to know right away in case a Yid wants to bring a Korban Nedava. That's what they had to know. Okay. So first we answered why he doesn't start with Karbonis Sibur, because now he's only telling you what's Negeya now, and Sibur, Karbonis Sibur is not Negeya. Now we'll also understand why he didn't start with Karbonis Chayva, even of a Yochid, but Karbonis that you must bring, but he rather start Karbonis that you bring out of your own will. He says like in the Imeyai Maluyim is nit mistaver as itens on neighbor sign of Chatoyim. To bring a Korban Chayva, a Yochid, is for an Aveire. It doesn't sound right that during these days Yidden should do Aveires, or Mechuyev werden by Korban Chayva, which would obligate them to bring a Korban that you must bring. Certainly, if we're talking about the 8th day of Elohim itself, then is given Ashros Ashchina b'Mishkan, the day that the Mishkan was put up, and the Eibishter rested in the Mishkan. And it says, what was the union of the Mishkan and the Eibishter resting in the Mishkan? Is Eidus L'Yisrael Shevita L'Makadosh Baruch Al Ma'aseh Egel. That proves the fact that the Eibishter came down in the Mishkan proved that he forgave them for the Egel. Such a special thing. You could imagine how the Yidden felt. So you think a Shaykhas Yidden should do Avedis around those days? Make it no sense. So it's not something that's common. So even if Aaron, the Yidden had to know what to do right away, things which are common. What's common? To bring a korban for an Aveda, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't, in order 30, that ever even brings, that Rashi and Shmini says that all Shivas Mea Meluim, the Shechina really didn't come down to the Mishkan. And the Yidden were embarrassed, Rashi says. They said, that all these things we did to show that the Eibush forgave us, and that's not happening, because it didn't happen the 7 days, but they thought it would, and it didn't. So we see how much the Yidden were waiting for this to see the Shechina and be close to the Eibush. So does it make sense that they did Avedas then, that they have to bring a Korban Chatos, a Korban Cheva? Dagegen is Yemis, but on the other hand, that does make sense. Abnei Yisrael, that the Yidden was gegeben mit Melechas HaMishkan mit Antivis Gedela B'Yosef, that gave so much money for the donation of building the Mishkan. So it makes sense that right after they put up the Mishkan, by their erste Gelegenheit gebracht Kabbanis Nedove. Makes sense, and the first chance, right away, I would imagine there was a line that formed. Yidden standing there with their animals to bring a korban to the Eibishter, but they gave out of Nedivas after they worked so hard to making the Mishkan. The Far stellt the Teire free, the Karbonis an all over Korov gebracht werden im Emeloim. That's what Teire first talks about the Karbonis, which is very possible and it's very close to probable that they brought in the Emeloim, which are Karbonis Nedova. That's very probable, but the Korban that they gave out of their donation. No, the Din for Karbonis Cheva. Then, when that's finished, you could talk about the Karbonis Cheva. So this is the answer to the Shaila, why the Teire starts with Karbonis Nedova, Alpi, Pshuta Shel Mikra. Pshuta Shel Mikra means, or something that Rasha says, or something that's very logical and straight in a person's straight mind. In your mind, you can figure this out. So Rasha, the way the Rebbe comes out, says, rely that we'll figure it out. Okay, I don't know if anyone figured it out. The Rebbe figured it out, but Rasha felt that this is so simple. Now he's going to say the was the Teira Heitom Karbonis Nedova B'Pnimi Seinyonim. The reason why the Teira starts with Karbonis Nedova, not Karbonis Cheva, Al Pichsidis. That we verstehen, behagdim, will understand by first bringing this introduction. Sizi, Yidu Abinah Karbonis, we know concerning Karbonis, Adar Ike dabei is the Kavone, Umachsheva Sa'odom, B'Shasim bringing the Korban. The main thing by a Korban, why does a Korban work? It depends on, because what a person has in mind, the Machsheva a person has, B'Shas, at the time you bring in the Korban. Ukemaimer Azal, the Chazal say, whether you do a lot or a little means if you bring a big korban, you have different coins. Some people brought little birds. Some people brought sheragas, a big animal. What are you giving David tomorrow? So the Gemara says, whether you bring a lot or a little, the main thing is your kavanah. So we see that the main by karbonis is not the physical. It's you have to do the physical part, but the main thing is kavanah. Even those karbonis, which are not as an Nedova. See, by Nedova, we could say you bring it because you want to give Eibishter. But even those that come because you did an Aveda, is the Kapore Bikim Esad Machshava Sodom. Why does the Korban work to forgive? Because of what the person has in mind. The Ramban is this Mavaya, like the Ramban explains. As by bringing a Korban, when they brought a Korban, their Odom Makrif, the person who's bringing the Korban, Trachten, he has to think. These are the words of the Ramban. That he sinned to the Eibishter with his body and his soul. Really, his blood should be spilled. And his body should be burned. Only why doesn't it happen? Because Hashem had chesed. The Eibush said, you know what, I'll take an exchange. We'll sprinkle the blood of the korban, that'll be instead of your blood. Nefesh tachas nefesh. We'll shecht, kill the animal instead of killing you. And this machshava, this kavanah makes the korban give a kapara. We see this also in the name korban. One of the meaning of the word korban is meloshin kiruv. Korban is close. What's meant as the aveda from korban is The Aveda Bekorban is to mekarav zayin the keiches echusim shemevishn, to bring close your keiches and your chushim, your abilities and your senses to the Eibishter. That means that the korban is that you have to think of bringing yourself close to the Eibishter. He says, now that we're saying that the main thing by a korban is this kavanah, Rabbi has a strong kasha. The Baal, that the Rikki from Karbonis is nidi ma'isa krove. Since the main thing by Karbonis is not the act of actually sacrificing the korban, nor the machsheva so the lifni b'shas krove, but it's only mainly what the person thinks at the time and before you bring the korban. He kommt es as in Teire steht in ganz nicht wegen der machsheva v'chavane. So the Teire doesn't mention it all the machsheva. If that's the ikar, why doesn't the Teire mention it? The part is the Teire magdim the dinim from Karbonis cheva. That's the answer. That's why the Teire talks first about the dinim of a Karbonis nedova. What's Karbonis nedova? The ganze hakrove is nor machmas nedivis halev l'shemaim. The whole purpose, the whole reason why you bring a Karbonis nedova is because you want to. So it's feeling. See, other Karbonis because I don't want it. I don't have a feeling to it. I have to do it. I have to do it. The dova you don't have to do. Why are you doing it? Because I have a feeling to it. Oh, so this is a Karban with a feeling. There meets Zok Teire by first talking about Karbonis nedova. With that, the Teire is telling us as Kavonas halev is the agdome klolis to the ganzen in the Karbonis. That the feeling and the kavanah you have, that's the introduction to all the karbonis. So that's the first of the karbonis. Tells you, think about the first carbon, you'll see what the ikar of a carbon is. Z is in the kude ha-ikris from alle karbonis, eich von karbonis cheva. The nekude, the main point of all the karbonis, even the karbonis cheva, is the nedova, the kavanah, which by carbon you see it. When those is eich was Rashi is medayik bel shena, this is why Rashi is medayik, why Rashi in the beginning says that this whole parsha is talking about karbonis nedova. The Lashon of Rashi is an interesting thing. The Karbonis Nedova Diber HaInyan. The Inyan is talking about Karbonis Nedova. Which are the Inyan? Rashi could have said, I mean, the Rebbe doesn't say that kasha. Rashi could have said, the Karbonis Nedova Diber HaParsha. It's a Parsha. Parsha Zu is talking about, what's the Diber Inyan? So the Rebbe, in Yene Sholteir, Chassidus teaches the word, doesn't mean Diber Inyan, these psukim. The inyan from karbonis, the whole concept of karbonis, all the karbonis, of all the karbonis. Karbonis and basically, they are all karbonis and by all the karbonis is the ikir and the divis alev and karbonis from akir karbonis. Because by all karbonis, the main thing is the feeling and the karbonis he has. So that's the inyan of karbonis. The Rashi says, "But dibra in karbonis and the inyan of karbonis." Then the Rebbe goes by a case even deeper. So till now we said that the ikir of karbonis and is the inyan for the feeling. And by Karbonis and Dova, you have a feeling that teaches you that we should know that that's the whole union of Karbonis. Deeper geret, the Kavonu Nedivis Halev is foditzich by Allah Karbonis. This union that we said, the Kavona and the feeling of the heart, that is warranted, that is needed by all the Karbonis. Not only it's telling you what you have to do. That's what we said till now. It tells you how you, by writing Karbonis and Dova first, tells you how you have to bring a Karban. That you have to bring a Karban with a Nedova, with a feeling. It's more than that. It tells you that this inyan of Nedova is be'etzem u'bepnimiyas faran by kolech v'echad Yisrael. Everyone has it. Any korban you bring, everyone has it. She's norbas by Karbonis Nedova, but by Karbonis Nedova, what der Mensch bringt, nicht weil es mechuyev u'muchrach was nor als Nedova for seinen eigenen guten Willen, but by Karbonis Nedova, which you bring because you personally want, zet sich on the pnimiyas eine begilui. So what every yid has, the pnimiyas is begilui by Nedova. See, by other karbonis, it's not the gila. It could be sometimes a person brings the chayva, but he doesn't have a feeling to it. So we're telling you should have a feeling. Taita tells you. Now he says more. We're telling the guy, whether you know about it or not, you have that feeling to the carbon. It's there bipnimis, just sometimes hidden. When the father is a demni talking sibi and Taita, this explains why the Taita doesn't command. It's an interesting, deep, very deep word. Because it's another shaila. The Rebbe didn't even ask at Beloshin shaila, but the shaila is, why doesn't it say you have to have the kavanah? It's not only telling us, the way we even said till now, the Torah hints to us that you have the kavanah, that's the first thing, fine and good. Wouldn't it make more sense the Torah should say that you have to be mechav? The Torah wants to, if that's the whole korban, why doesn't it say it? It says, now we understand why it's not a tzivu in command, nor Rashi that sale the mitzi is Rashi telling, but the fact is that the karbonis nedova dibra inyan, that karbonis nedova dibra, that the karbonis is the inyan of kavanah, because be'emes, alle Karbonis seien a Karban Nedova. It is a Karban Nedova. Doesn't have to tell us. Weil jeder Ried hat in die Divis Alev, a Kavanim is a Pnimis Nafshe, Nimiusev and Nishmose. Every Eden is Pnimis and Nisham has the Kavanim. There's no reason for a Tziva. A reason for a Tziva is something that you don't have. I'm telling you, do it. Everyone has it betzim. So the Torah doesn't write Lashon Tzibur. But dos is eich was megifin by karbonas and psak din. We find by karbonas a din. The Pasuk says like this. It's a din, which means the Rebbe stresses the word psak din, means this is real. The Pasuk says yakriv eisei. You have to be makriv it. So the Gemara Darshan Malamet Shekefenes, it teaches us that you force a person to bring a korban. If a person has to bring a korban, let's say he didn't avein and he has to bring a korban chatos and doesn't want to, we will force him. Yochel bal korche, you mean push it by force. You go against his will and you force him to make a korban. Talmud Leib it says it has to be with will. Okay, here we're saying you could force him. You're saying he has to want it. You force him till he says I want. But the question is that called rotzen? If you force a guy till he says I want, is that called rotzen? But we find that someplace else. With the Rambam, with the Smavayr, when the get. You know, by a get, there's a din that if the best in Paschals you have to give a get, and he doesn't want to, you can force him to give a get. Even though by get there is a din, get cannot be given forced. So how do you force him? So it says you force him until he says I want. And the same question we have over there. What do you mean he says I want? Because you forced him, he says I want, but he doesn't really want. So what does the Rambam say? This is what the Rambam says. Every Yid wants to do the right thing. Every Yid wants to be a Yid. He wants to do all the mitzvahs. Stay away from Avedas. He says, I don't want. It's the Yitzhahara that's forcing him not to want. When you hit him, you're weakening his Yitzhahara. And he says, I want. It reveals what he really, really wants in Pnimius. So you divorce with the Rotzen. So the same thing is Ibra Karbonis, it says a din. That if you force him, if he says I want, we know he wants. He says I don't, then he says I want because you're hitting him. Because with Pnimius he wants, which means that with Pnimius he has this kavanah. Punkt vidos is by Liretzene, just like the Negeya Poshet, whether he wants or not, we said that he really, every Yid really wants to bring the korban if he has to. Azez is Negeya ala kavanas was fodder is makav korban. Same thing is not only whether he wants or not, all the other kavanas that you have to have by a korban. Every Yid really has. These korban loshen kiruv akeches vachushim lakadosh baruch hu. Till we say that the taich of korban means that you're getting closer to the Eibishter. So if a Yid brings a korban, no matter how he brings it, if it's called korban, it's a kiruv. That means he's close. Ados is dobi pnimis b'yadarit. B'yadarit, every Yid has this kiruv to the Eibishter. Okay, Teres Admur Azok, how you do it. The Alter Rebbe's famous word, a Yid niter will or niter can not be received in Alakus. A Yid doesn't want and can't be cut off from the Eibishter. Every Yid has this. So here we explain deeper the idea that Rebbe said that the Torah tells us by Korban Nedova that that's the first, because that's the Yisod of all the Korbanos, which before he said means that it's telling us that you have to have the Kavanah. Now he's saying even deeper, he's telling us even further, this is the Inyan, this is a fact, it's not a tzivui. Every Yid has this Kavanah. That explains why the Torah refers to the people, to the Yidden, with the name Odom. It says, Odom ki yakriv mikem, a man will be makriv from amongst you. Who's amongst you? Who is that? It means amongst the Bnei Yisrael, the Yidden. So to who did David say Odom ki yakriv mikem? Ramesh say to the Yidden. So it says Odom mikem. So he calls them the Yidden Mashem Odom. Now we know that Yidden have people have another four names: Odom, Ish, Gever, and Enish. So it says Odom is the highest madrege. Why? The Shem Odom is Hashem Adame Le'elyon. Now it's interesting that Pashup Shat, why is a person called Odom? It says in Pashup Breshis. Because a person was made min ha'adomo. They took sand from the ground and made it into a human being. That's one pshat, it's a simple pshat. But the way it says, see, in order the Shalom, in order 41, it brings Mar Mekemis, he says that the word Adam comes from the word Adam el-Elyon. Actually, the word Adam el-Elyon is said by Nebuchadnezzar. He said, "Oh my God, Adam el-Elyon means I'm compare myself le-Elyon to the one above." But Lapel, the word Adam and Adam is the same. So the reason a person is called Adam because he has a neshama. Adam el-Elyon means he's similar to the Eibishter. The neshama was a chelik kamal mamash. Neshama which are part of the Eibishter. So here it uses the word Adam. Adam ki yakriv mikem. And das is doba kol ish Yisrael. This neshama is by, and he's quoting the Lashon of Tanya. This is there in the beginning of the second Perek. This neshama is do. There is ba kol ish Yisrael. Echad tzadik ve'echad roshe. It's by every Yid, tzadik and a roshe. And the Rebbe in order 44 says an interesting word. Why does he say echad tzadik ve'echad roshe? He already said, Kol Ish Yisrael. It is by every Yid. He has to touch. If every Yid means whoever he is. Why does he repeat Echad Tzadik V'Echad Rasha? So that is an interesting word. This is negay also to Pesach, to Haggadah. He wants to be hint that every Yid has in himself the Echad. So he says every Yid has this neshama, and he says Echad Tzadik V'Echad Rasha. Tzadik has Echad in him, Rasha. Just like it says in the Sichas of the Friedrich Rebbe, when we say in the Haggadah, Echad Chacham V'Echad. Why does it have to say that? Kneged Arba Abonim Dibra Teira Chacham Rasha. Tam Shein Yedei Lisha. Why does it say Echad Chacham Echad Rasha? So the Friedrich Rebbe Taishes wants to tell us that the Chacham has in himself the Echad. The Rasha has Echad. They all have Echad. I think there's even a story. I don't know if the Friedrich Rebbe tells that story. I don't know. There was once in the time of the Baal Shem Tov, was a very posh that he didn't know anything. So when he said the Haggadah Pesach, and it said Echad Tzadik, he didn't know. So he knows when you say Echad, you put your hands Echad. So he said the Haggadah, Echad Chacham, Echad Rasha. So I don't know. I think the Baal Shem Tov said, it took it up. This is true. This Echad means that everyone has the Echad in him. So since every Yid has the Echad in him, every Yid has in the Neshama, what's mitzadem is do by alle Yidin the Nedivis Halev Arot to sein Korban L'Lakus. That's what everyone wants to be close to the Eibishter. So that's the reason why here, when the Torah talks about the Korbanos and Korbanos Nedava, it says the Lashon Odom. Could have said Ish Ki Yakriv. What's Odom Ki Yakriv? To tell you that we're talking, this din is because every Yid is an Odom. This is all the reason, according to the Pnimi, the Chassidus Pshat in Rashi. But Rashi is Mefarish. Oh, Rashi has another thing. Rashi says, Odom, he quotes the word Odom from the Pasuk, and he says, Loma Nemar. Why does it have to say the word Odom? It could have said, start off, Ki Yakrim Mikem, what is it, Odom? So Rashi answers, Ma Odom Rishon Lehikrim in Agezel, Shakalo Yishalei. Just like Odom Rishon didn't bring he brought Karbonis, but he didn't steal to bring Karbonis. Maybe he did. How do we know he didn't? There's nothing to steal. Everything was his. He couldn't steal anything. So that's a remes to the Eden that you can't bring a korban that you stole. That's what Rashi. So it comes out that Rashi learns, where do we know this din that you can't bring a stolen korban? From the Pasuk Odom Ki Yakriv. The Chure does not understood. We find in Gemara as Mizmamayit Gezel from Wort Mikem. In Gemara says a different shot. Since it says Mikem, from that we say Mikem has to be yours, from amongst you, but not steal. Why does Rashi learn that we exclude stealing from the word Odom was his blaze aremes? Doesn't say anything. It's aremes. Ma Odom Rishon, just like Odom, the original Odom. Didn't steal, so you should also. But the word Mekem sounds better. Mekem means from yours and not stolen. Why does Rashi not learn from that? Is there beer in them? So there's the explanation based on Yenush L'Teira. He's like, Das was Odom Rishon, is Hakel Hoy Shalei Gemer B'Tchilas B'Riyosei. When was everything Odom Rishon's? In the beginning when he was created. Zayin dik in Gan Eden kedem achet. In Gan Eden, before he sinned, there was nobody else. So he was the only person. Everything was his. See, later on, depends already. When there were more people, but there ever has in this order, long order. So first of all, could be even that since Adam Rishon owned everything, so even when more people were born, it still was his. Unless he gave something to somebody. But there's another pshat that it's not the pshat everything was his. The reason why he didn't steal, because there was nobody to steal from. Now, nobody to steal from was only right in the beginning. Before his children were born, there was nobody to steal from. So the other pshat that we say is because he owned everything, that could be even for later. But for the Gashmis, there were things that he gave to others. The Kayin, Hevel, they had things, they had sheep. So when really was Odom Rishon the one that could not have stolen? There's no such thing as stealing. Before any person else was there. So that is before the Chetek Tzadas. And das is the remes in Pirush Rashi. That's the remes in Rashi. That Odom, which we said before, is Adam El Elyon, is the Neshama, which is like the Eibishter. What is do by Yadrid and every Yid has is Bedugmas Odom Rishon we are given Kedem Achet. Want to say every Yid has a Neshama like Odom Rishon before the Chet. Is an Azad Darge, as is Hecher from the Minyan of Chatoim. Higher than any Chet. Like Odom Rishon before the Tzadas. A Kaponim is Nichaych by Machiv from Kaboras Chet, from Korm Kaboras Chet. So he's trying to say that Be'etzem by every Yid is not Shaykh to forgive for a Chet. And those Zok Tzicharuis, where do we see this? That it's not because of a Chet. So actually, the Gashmi is it expresses itself by Kabbanas Nadove. Was kommt nicht auf a Chet, doesn't come from Aveda. No, it's had in a Divis Alef von Aiden, because a Yid's heart, if took on Korb Meloshin Kiruf, can all look because to the Kus. So really by Korban Nedova, that's where we see this concept that it's no chet. So you're like Odom Nishkin Nachet. Or by Leidach, on the other hand, it does Faranech by Allah Korbanos. This is the way where we see it. But by all Korbanos, you have the Afilu by Korbanos was Kuban Afachet. Even Korbanos do come from Avera. You still have this Nakuda there of the connected to the Neshama, the way it's before the Chet. Warum bald wie Ayid is machal to bring in a Korban Kapar Achet is with Lamed Schus always. Because as soon as he didn't Avera, the moment he decides I'm going to bring a Korban, Vert Nisgale der Odom Shabbai. The Odom that's in him, the Lakus that's in him, gets revealed. Was is Hecha for that part of Haina Chatoim. Ki Odom Erishon Kedim Achet Kenal Odom Erishon for the Chet as we said. Ubekeach Zeh Vert LeChapiro. The fact that he decided to bring a Korban, that's a kavane of being higher than Chet. The Chet wird in ganzen abgewischt. The Avera gets wiped out completely. Apikola now is Echmuvim was the Teir is the man Vayikra Moshe. This explains also why the Torah starts off before it goes into the Din Kabbalah. It says Vayikra Moshe. Hashem called to Moshe. We Rashi schreibt Bariches. Rashi writes very length. And this is a lashon chiva. That the word Vayikra called is a lashon of love. Lashon shemalach ashoras mishtam shemi a lashon that the malachim use. So the Rebbe asks a shaila. Was lechure? For what schreibt es the Torah? Dafke by Kabbalah Kaparshas Kabbalah. The Torah wants to tell us Eibishter loves the Eden. He loved Moshe and he loved the Eden. That's why it says Vayikra. Why does it say by Kabbalah? Why not by other things? And the second thing, for what is Rashi as a Meirich, as Vayikra, as a Lashon Chiba? Why does Rashi write Dariches? It just doesn't just write it's a Lashon Chiba. Lashon Chiba, Malachim use it, and by the Goyim, by the Nevi'im of the Goyim, it doesn't say that. Why does Rashi do it? The beer in them, the answer is like this. The Gezok Free, as I mentioned before, is the erste Zach, was Yidden gewollt ton noch, der Kommas am Mishkan. The first thing that we imagine the Yidden wanted to do after the Mishkan was put up, the Givem bringing, was bring Kabbanas and Dover. We assumed they wanted to bring Kabbanas and Dover. But those Bavais of the Chvivis is said by Yidden for Mishkan. That shows how much the Yidden loved the Mishkan, that they couldn't wait. As soon as the possibility came, they did it. So that's what the Yidden showed to the Eibishter. Kamayim aponim laponim came Leib ha'odam la'odam. It says the way, just like when your face reflects in water, two people, the heart of one person reflects the other. If you love me, I will love you. And the same applies to the Eden and the Eibush. You see the Rebbe put in the word ha'elyon. Just like by water, so Poshup Shat is Kain Leib ha'odam la'odam, a person to a person. But the Rebbe puts in the heart of the Odam ha'elyon. The Eibush is sometimes referred to as Odam ha'elyon, legabe the Odam of down here. Hoteich der Eibush da aruz gewiesen, the Gate lachvivis von Hashem zu Eden. Since the Eden showed their Gate lachvivis zum Eibishten, so the Eibush, and how do they show it? Through Karbonis, right away to bring the Karbonis, the Eibush showed his love to them. The far is Eich Rasha Meirich, and the Rasha goes and wants to tell us in detail how the Eibush loved us. No chayin in them. Another thing, it says Yedua Vayikra Moshe. It says in Chassidus that when it says Vayikra Moshe, Hashem called to Moshe, and that is the beginning of the parsha of Karbonis. It in the Sinas Keach of Avedis Karbonis. Calling to Moshe, that gave the Keach for Eden to be able to bring Karbonis. And but the Vayikra from Avedis Karbonis is in the Divis Alev Kenal Baruch. The main thing of Karbonis is the feeling. And what gave the Yidden the ability to have the feeling in Karbonas Bechlal, and the main thing, the feeling, is that Hashem called to Moshe. And das is was the Torah is Magne Vayikra Moshe, was is a Lashon Chiba. That's what the Torah starts of Vayikra Moshe, which is a Lashon of love. Or di Nedivis Alef on Yidden zum Eibishter. This Nedivis Alef, this feeling that the Yidden had to the Eibishter, which is a love to Yidden to the Eibishter, which expressed itself in the Karbonas that he wanted to bring right away, Nehmt sich von Vayikra Moshe. That comes because the Eibush are called Moshe, which is Chvivas, and who's Moshe? Moshe represents all the Eden. When the Chvivas for the Eibush device Tarus Eden. The fact that Eibush shows love to the Eden. It says here, Vayikra Moshe, he showed the love to Moshe. Good. So in Orah 52, he says, he brings from Tanya, every Yid has a piece of Moshe in him, says in Tanya. So the Eibush showed the love to every Eden by showing the love to Moshe. This explains another part. But Rashi is Messiah, Rashi finishes off that by Moshe, it's love. By the Nevi'im of the Goyim, he revealed himself in a very Lashon Hara means in a temporary way, not in a real Choshev way. What's in the Geyet do the chiluk between the Vayikra by Moshe and the Vayikra by Bilam and Nevi'im Salem? Why is the Geyet here to know the difference? Rashi explains Pshat and Posik. Pshat and Posik, why does it say Vayikra? They should love him. Why is Negei to say, but by Bilam it doesn't say Vayikra. It's Vayikra. David doesn't love him. What's Negei here? No, talking about Nevi'ah Umas Ha'elam, the Nevi'im of the Goyim. But the Rinyan B'Zeh is Kanal, the Rinyan is like this. In order this feeling of the heart that every Yid has, Nicht gucken, makes no difference how he is. Like we said before, even a person does Avedas, be'etzem he has in Divis Halev. That's the main, that expresses the difference between Yidden and Goyim. Yidden seinen be'etzem Tevik Dusha, Yidden be'etzem are holy and good. Und die Yoni built it zu ihm, Shebehem, kommen nur from Velosh Naram, and talk for any negative thing, anything that's bad, comes as the Rambam said, because he hates the heart to try to force him, but it's not real. By Goyim, he quotes from the Maimer of Ranat, in Yeshba Meize Dover Teitel, they have something good that's not their etzem, it's something in addition to them. So that's the reason, that's the difference with Yidden and Goyim. And the Sheire Shachilik, where does the Yisod, the root of this different Yidden and Goyim, Nemtzich der Fun was by Yidden, is dort der Vayikra Moshe, because by Yidden there's the Vayikra Moshe. What's the Vayikra, Rasha says? The love that the Eibush showed Moshe, which means all the Yidden. The Chibes HaKadosh Baruch Hu zu Yidden. The love of the Eibush to Yidden, mitzad der Chibe und Bchira von Eibush to Yidden. The fact that Eibush loves Yidden and chose Yidden, seien sie allemal verbunden mit Pnimis, mit der Lukus, the Yidden are always connected to Lukus, even if you don't see it, the Pnimis is there, and all you have to do is scrape a little bit the surface, and that will come out. Before I finish, I want to repeat again what I said when I started, that this shir was dedicated to Ilu Nishmas of Reb Chaim Gurovich. And I said, like I said, not that I knew him and this, but we have a strong feeling to him because he's always from the first ones to be on this shir and all the Fabrengas. He showed such interest and he brought out a certain, I don't know, a certain geschmack that I got from him. So, Tei Nishmas, it's Rebbe Tzara Chaim, a kiss of Ran and Sheikh Na'ofar, very, very soon.
Amen.